No lizards. No aliens. No nonsense. This is Reality Bytes.
Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 6th of July 2015, and welcome to UCY.TV listeners who will be listening to this rebroadcast on Friday on their own network. Starting off with Greece, as people will know, in the European kind of continent, if you like. Greece has said no to Europe, basically, and told them to get lost one way or another. But I'm sure they'll come back and ask them again, and they'll probably have to give the right answer this time. But going back to last week, this is what they were being told last week from the Telegraph. This is what their view of Greece was at that time. Greece debt crisis live. EU leaders, this is the 28th of June, by the way. EU leaders say the referendum is a choice between the euro and drachma as Grexit looms. That's a Greek exit from the European Union, or basically the euro, but in de facto the European Union. Greeks can take out only €60 per day from ATMs as Greece admits it will default on $1.6 billion euro debt. For Greece's international creditors, regime change is the ultimate goal. Now, where have we had that before? Regime change usually involves imposing no-fly zones and then invading the country. I mean, is that what they're after now? Do they want the army to take over, maybe? Greece's Syriza-led government has been backed into a corner. Either Syriza will be pushed out of government or Greece will be forced out of the euro. They won't be forced out, they're actually voting to get out. Apparently there was a basis for a deal at some stage last week, but then at the last moments, hey, surprise, surprise, in comes the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, to say that the conditions were not enough and insist on the addition of a whole series of demands on pensions reform that were bound to be unacceptable to Greece's Syriza-led government. On several occasions now, Syriza leaders have accused international creditors of attempting to bring about regime change. Again, it's all militaristic again, isn't it? Normally Surely you'd be tempted to dismiss these claims as no more than paranoia, of the type that often afflicts the radical left. On this occasion, however, there is almost certainly something in it, not that amid the sophistry of official press releases and language anyone would ever admit to it. So here's a Telegraph saying that this is actually a conspiracy against Greece by the IMF and the European Union. It's not that the Troika won't do a deal with Greece, it's just that it won't do a deal with Syriza. Even if the basis for one could be found, the IMF, the European Commission and the European Central Bank would not trust the current government to implement it. In such circumstances, they would rather not have one at all, and damn the consequences. Well, the IMF, the European Commission and the European Central Bank have never been elected to anything. So why should they do a deal with them? Why should they even listen to them? If, on the other hand, a more centrist government were to emerge in Greece, a far more conciliatory offer would immediately be on the table. Why can't they make that now? And then maybe Greeks would vote yes. Greece would be welcomed back with open arms. As long as Greece remains led by Syriza, there is virtually no chance of achieving the stated goal, remaining in the euro, but with a less severe form of austerity. A less severe form of austerity. How kind of them. You maybe get 2 slices of bread instead of 1, a day. The irony is that an alternative government would be much more likely to achieve this outcome than Syriza. It doesn't state why here. Sunday, the day of the planned referendum, is still a long way off, and much can happen over the next 6 days. Indeed, there is a good reason to doubt the government will ever get round to holding the referendum at all. Well, they got that wrong, didn't they? Never mind the practical difficulties of organising the plebiscite at such short notice. The plebs, organising the plebs. Or indeed the expected €110 million cost. And there is actually no longer any deal for the Greeks to vote on. It expires on Tuesday. Well, maybe they just wanted to vote to make sure you got the message, European Union, eh? In any case, the referendum is wide open to legal challenge on all kinds of grounds. It's also possible that the President, who is a Conservative, could resign over the issue, making it impossible to forge ahead with a vote likely to split Greeks down the middle. In the event of a no vote, it's the end of the road for Greek membership of the euro, and if a yes vote, it is presumably the end of the road for Syriza, and that may well have been the game plan all along. So there's a game plan to get rid of the Greek government. But if they vote no and they're not in the euro anymore, well, you know what? They're better off. But they ain't staying that here, are they? But what did they say today after the referendum voted no? Greece has been taken hostage by a government disguising its incompetence as heroism. What about democracy? What about democracy? Isn't that what we're all supposed to be striving for and bombing countries into the Stone Age to impose? Desperate suffering awaits a people who have chosen easy lies over uncomfortable truths. I mean, tell that to Irish people who were conned by the European Union to vote yes. Well, they didn't vote yes, they voted no, but it was rigged. A second time for the Lisbon Treaty, which wiped out their constitution. And then they were plunged into poverty. After being told a pack of lies that they need to vote yes for jobs and security and all that garbage. Same thing that Greece was told. The image that best captures what has happened in Greece in the last week is not the young Greeks dancing in Athens fountains celebrating their defiance, or the stirring words of their hero and Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras. It is Zoe Konstantopoulou, the Speaker of the Greek Parliament, her face a mask of fanaticism as she gave a raised fist salute to her ground troops, the ranks of the young and unemployed, in Syntagma Square last Thursday. Greece's populist coalition of radical leftists, Syriza and hard-right nationalists, the Independent Greeks, have turned the 40% they won in January's elections into a more than 60% landslide of a referendum victory. I wouldn't call 60% a landslide. They have done this without delivering any of the programme of minimum wage hikes, taxes on the tycoons or social justice they promised. They now have a vague popular mandate that will be wielded like a bludgeon against the remaining critics inside the country. Well, the European Union does not have any mandate whatsoever because nobody voted for it. So what right do they have to dictate to anybody? More than Tsipras, the charming demagogue Konstantopoulou reveals Syriza's real intentions. She has undermined the independence of Greece's central bank. There's an oxymoron. The independence of Greece's central bank. Well, central banks aren't independent by their very nature. They're controlled by all the other central banks. And part of the Communist Manifesto, of course. Central banks. Publicly hectoring its sober governor Yanis Stournaris. She has openly bullied the private media. The media is vilifying her, and she's got a right to fight back, I would think. When it appeared that her colleagues might lose their nerve last week and backtrack on the referendum, she closed Parliament to prevent the vote that would have enabled this. Konstantopoulou, along with the orthodox Marxist wing of Syriza led by Patagiotis Lafanzanis, the Energy Minister, do not envisage a Greece of structural reforms in return for soft loans from the foreign creditors. Their vision, which one businessman dubbed Lafazanistan, is a fully nationalised economy in which all key institutions can be made subordinate to the extremist political narrative. Well, what's the difference between that and what's going on in any other country in Europe where all their infrastructure, all their utilities have all been privatised? What is the difference? Private corporations dictate and that's it. There's no majority in Greece for their programme. Well, they got that wrong as well, didn't they? Which means a hard default on Greece's debt pile and a return to the drachma. So the referendum was framed as a question of national pride. Will you vote for humiliation and surrender, or defiance and a better deal? The last part of that is a cruel deception that will start to unravel with nationalisation of Greece's systematic banks as early as next week. We'll see what happens, eh? I mean, this is just extremism in the widest sense from the financial institutions in the European Union. They're the extremists. They're the ones making threats. You know, they're going to do their damnedest to make sure that Greece goes nowhere, and that I'm sure they're going to stir up trouble there. I wouldn't be surprised to see Greece split in two the same way as they did with Ukraine. I wouldn't be surprised, and then the army will step in. But Greece is no stranger to military. I think the last military government is as early as the 70s, the mid-70s. I think the last time the army took control there, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen again. But I guess it just depends who's at the head of that army if that happens, and which way he or she will bend to the IMF's will. Because somebody's going to have to, I guess, somewhere. Unless Greece just keeps saying no, and gets these criminals. Actually, they should start arresting these people if they dare come into the country and start making threats against them. It's called terrorism. Financial terrorism. Tsipras left with a choice of breaking up Syriza in order to secure a deal with Greece's creditors, or gambling Greece's entire economy, chose to sacrifice the national interest. Well, the national interest is what they voted for, isn't it? The Greeks have been taken as willing hostages by a government which has disguised its own incompetence and extremist ideology as heroism. The buffoonish defence minister Panos Kaminos, whose right-wing rabble, the independent Greeks, have for years insisted that Greeks are being sprayed with mind-altering chemicals, that'll be chemtrails I guess, can now make veiled threats that the armed forces stand ready to guarantee internal security. Wouldn't it be fantastic to see a Greek fighter jet shoot down one of these things? Wouldn't that be great? Never know, it might start a pattern, eh? Bold promises evaporate, assurances that capital controls will not be imposed prove unfounded. Syriza immunised itself against the consequences of its own lies and miscalculations by invoking foreign stooges, who are to blame for everything that happens. Desperate suffering awaits a people who have chosen easy lies over uncomfortable truths. Their Balkan neighbours are queuing up to warn them that where the populists are leading them, but for now their voices are not being heard. So here you are, the Balkanisation of Greece, which is just south of Serbia, and all those countries that were involved in the Balkan War. Directly south. And of course in Macedonia they're causing trouble as well, these financial terrorists, and stirring up hatred and all the rest of it. So maybe they're just trying to spread it south towards Greece to ensure that they mentioned in the last article that regime change was a goal. Maybe we'll see no-fly zones, as I said in the previous article. But anyway, talking about terrorism, in London, police criticised for not arresting a man carrying ISIS flag near Parliament. I wonder who put him up to that. Metropolitan Police say actions were considered to be within the law after photographs show a man with a flag on his back carrying a child holding another flag. Well, it isn't against the law to carry any flag, so, that's a true statement. So within the law, there is no law against it. Police have been criticised for failing to arrest a man who has been seen wandering near Big Ben draped in an Islamic State flag. The man was photographed walking past a group of scouts outside the House of Parliament. As he wore a large ISIS flag on his back, he was carrying a small child on his shoulders who was waving a smaller flag in their hand. A statement released by the Metropolitan Police confirmed that the man was seen by police, but that his actions were not considered to be unlawful. The man was spoken to by officers with consideration given to relevant legislation, particularly Public Order Act. The decision was taken by officers at the time that the man was acting within the law. He was not arrested. Wearing, carrying or displaying of an emblem or flag by itself is not an offence, unless the way in which or the circumstance in which the emblem is worn, carried or displayed is such as to cause reasonable suspicion that the person is a supporter or member of a prescribed organisation. While support of the membership of ISIS is unlawful, it is not a criminal offence to advocate the creation of an independent state. The decision not to arrest the man has been criticised on social media, with some using it to question wider notions of public safety. These are tweets sent to the police. Is it true about the man walking around London with an ISIS flag? He wasn't arrested? How can we feel safe in the same city? That was from somebody apparently called Joseph Ross. So I hope he's ashamed of himself for acting such a prick in national media. What is he expecting? The guy's going to whip him to death with an ISIS flag? Eh? And then here's another one. How can someone parade around central London draped in an ISIS flag and not be arrested under public order offence? What a joke. Well, that's because it's not an offence. So there's just another idiotic remark from somebody calling himself Tosan Abbey. And then another one. How can a man be walking around central London with an ISIS flag and not be arrested? Bloody joke. Images of the man were reportedly posted on a Korean forum after a tourist spotted him in central London. Only one person spotted him. This date comes just days before the capital marks the anniversary of those killed in the 7/7 terror attacks, and a week after 30 British tourists were killed in the Tunisian beach massacre. A Home Office spokeswoman declined to comment, adding that the decision not to arrest the man was an operational one. I wonder what that means. Does that mean he was taking part in an operation? That's why when the police spoke to him, they didn't arrest him. Maybe he showed them some form of ID. I mean, who in their right mind would do this kind of thing unless they were put up to it? And I'll tell you what, it shows how tolerant people are that he wasn't beat up in the street, doesn't it? But here's the opposite. This is July the 3rd in the Independent. Tourist takes selfie in Brighton, arrested on terrorism offences. A tourist was arrested on suspicion of terrorism offences after taking a selfie video in Brighton. Nasser Al-Ansari, 38, said he was filming a video of himself on his mobile phone outside a shopping centre in Brighton when the incident happened, according to the Argus. That must be a local paper or something. Mr. Al-Ansari from Kuwait said he was then taken to a car park by officers and held on suspicion of terrorism offences for 3 hours. He explained, I said, I am 100% cooperative. I will go wherever you wish. I just want to go home. He says that police kept his mobile phone in order to examine it. He stole his phone. Detective Chief Inspector Paul Betts from Brighton and Hove CID confirmed to the Daily Mail that Mr. Al-Ansari had been arrested under the Terrorism Act and released after an assessment was made and there was no immediate threat. No immediate threat, but he might have been a threat later with his phone. However, it was not possible at the time to examine his mobile phone, so an investigation continues in order to establish if it contains any evidence of a criminal offence. This will be completed as soon as possible, and the phone will be returned to him if there is no reason to retain it further. What garbage! Following the attack in Tunisia last week, the UK's official terror threat was increased to severe, meaning that a terrorist attack is regarded as highly likely. Police have increased their presence at a number of events in recent days, including Wimbledon and Armed Forces Day. 38 people were killed in the massacre on a Tunisian beach, including 30 Britons. The UK is also preparing to mark the 10th anniversary of the 7/7 bombings next week. Across the UK, a minute's silence was observed today at midday to mourn those who lost their lives in the attack in Tunisia. So here we are, we're ramping up the terror threat because it's coming up to 7/7. Be afraid. Be very afraid, eh? But here's another clown in London. Boris Johnson. Cut top rate of income tax, but only if firms pay living wage. Now, living wage is a subsistence wage. You can't actually do any living on it. You can survive barely if you buy the crappiest food, and you don't have any kind of social life whatsoever. That's about it. Live on beans and cheese. Mind you, cheese is expensive, so maybe it's just the beans you'll have to settle with, and that one slice of bread I talked about earlier for your toast, if you can afford the electricity to toast it. London Mayor backs call to cut top rate from 45% to 40%, but says business has got to start paying people a wage they can live on. I guess that'll mean his tax bill goes down. Boris Johnson is calling for the top rate of income tax to be cut to 40% and for large firms to pay the living wage to employees just days before the first Conservative budget for 19 years. The former Minister John Redwood has also backed reducing the top rate from 45p, a highly controversial move which would be labelled as a further tax cut for millionaires. Well, that's exactly what it is. Chancellor George Osborne indicated on Sunday that there would be no such cut at Wednesday's budget, as he disclosed that the government had now found 12 billion of cuts to Britain's welfare bill. So they've taken 12 billion off the poor, and now they're talking about giving another 5% back to the very, very wealthy. How nice, eh? There's fairness for you. In his Daily Telegraph column on Monday, the Mayor of London gets paid highly for that as well. I think it's 200 grand or something. I read that out last week. A year. For writing this garbage. Wrote, Nigel Lawson has recently argued that the top rate should go back down to 40p, and many Conservatives agree. I am among them. Well, they're all millionaires. That's why they agree. This could have only be implemented if larger firms raised wages for the lowest paid workers, Johnson argued. How does that work? That means they want to raise the low pay of like factory workers or whatever, people that make coffee in Starbucks or something. So they come into the tax threshold and they pay the tax, and the rich get the 5% taken off theirs. That's what's going on here. This is a very serious problem, and we would need to sort it out before any such top rate tax cut could go ahead. That problem is fairness, and how such a cut would be seen by the wider population. But, fairness, eh? You give 5p in the pound back to a multi-millionaire, and you start taxing minimum wage workers. That's fair, isn't it? So basically the low paid workers are paying 5% back to the very, very wealthy. But then that's serfdom, isn't it? And as for low pay, it isn't a function of market forces. It's being propped up by the taxpayer. That needs to end, and that means business has got to start paying people a wage they can live on. Some businesses have already adopted a living wage of £7.85 an hour and £9.15 an hour in London, rather than the adult minimum wage of £6.50. Appearing on BBC Radio 4's Today programme, Redwood said a top rate tax cut would result in an increase in revenues for the Treasury. How does he work that out? You take 5% off a tax rate and it increases revenues? It increases revenues for the very wealthy. The way to get more money off the rich is to have tax rates that they are prepared to pay. So he's trying to say the very rich are avoiding tax. Is he admitting to that, is he? He'd be right, wouldn't he? We've just seen a surge in revenues after we cut the 50p rate to 45p, and that is very encouraging. There are some very rich people who have a privilege that the rest of us don't have. He's a millionaire himself, this boy. Those of us who get a monthly pay packet from our employer can't decide how much we are going to be paid according to how much tax. We need the money we are paid. But very rich people have a choice of where they book income or whether they take income at all. If they have their own company, they do not have to pay themselves so much if the tax rate is penal. That is exactly what happened with the 50p tax rate. Yeah, right. The Shadow Chancellor, Chris Leslie, said it would be an act of gross irresponsibility and unfairness for the government to cut the 45p rate for those who earned more than £150,000. There's not many of them. On Sunday, Osborne said his priority was reducing taxes for lower and middle income earners. Well, that's not going to happen either. Appearing on the BBC's Andrew Marr show, the Chancellor said his priorities were raising the tax-free allowance to £12,500 and raising the threshold at which people begin paying the higher rate to £50,000. £50,000 and you start paying 45p in a pound tax. Eh? There have been speculation that the Chancellor would use his first budget as part of a Conservative majority government to reduce the top rate and feed the rich even more money. But here's what happens when you put people on minimum wage and living wage, as they call it, or no wage at all, in terms of just taking people off the dole or social welfare. The number of homeless people in Britain is more than 3 times the official figures. The true number of young people who are homeless far exceeds government figures. They're only talking about young people here. There's a lot of people who aren't young who are homeless as well, who aren't included in these figures either. So it's got to be more than 3 times the official figures, isn't it? According to a major new study by housing experts at Cambridge University being released on Monday. They're being released from Cambridge University. Some 83,000 homeless young people have had to rely on councils and charities for a roof over their heads during the past year, more than 3 times the 26,852 young people recorded in homeless figures released by the Department for Communities and Local Government. And there are about 35,000 young people in homeless accommodation at any one time across Britain. The worryingly high levels of young people using homelessness services across Britain is a minimum estimate, and it is likely that in reality more homeless young people access support across the UK, the research said. The study by Cambridge University's Centre for Housing and Planning Research was commissioned by the homeless charity Centrepoint and provides the most comprehensive picture of youth homelessness to date. It draws on official figures in conjunction with examinations of 40 local authorities and a national poll of more than 2,000 16 to 25-year-olds. The research looked at homelessness during the course of a year, including rough sleeping, staying in hostels and sofa surfing. Now, they're only talking about people who are 16 to 25. There's a lot of people under 16 on the streets as well. Lots of them. So again, another increase is going to be added to this figure. More than 1 in 7 young people, government figures do not capture those who do not meet narrow criteria for being homeless, which would force councils to help them. Many homeless people do not come into contact with a local authority, and those that do are often considered to be intentionally homeless or not in a priority need, categories such as being under 18 or pregnant, the study says. More than 1 in 7 young people, 17%, have slept rough, including in places such as cars or squats during the past year, according to a ComRes survey done for the study. 1 in 7. That's outrageous, isn't it? The 21st century. When the poll data was scaled up to reflect the wider population, an estimated 1.3 million young people aged 16 to 24 have slept rough through the past year, said the research. Collecting coherent national data on youth homelessness is essential if the true scale of the problem is to be understood and funded accordingly so that young people receive the support they urgently need, the research concluded. Well, how come Cambridge University can get all this information but your government can't? That's a question that's got to be asked. Who's responsible for their figures being completely bogus? How about sacking them, putting them on a living wage, and see how long they last on the street? How about that? Successive governments have been making policy in the dark as they have failed to grasp the sheer scale of youth homelessness in the UK, said Balbir Chattrick, Policy Director of Centrepoint. We're seeing the consequences of funding decisions based on this lack of knowledge, which have placed extreme pressure on charities and local authorities, with the majority of hostels full or oversubscribed. Young people typically find themselves facing homelessness through no fault of their own. As a society, we owe them a national safety net devised from more than just guesswork. Well, as I mentioned in the last couple of articles, George Osborne's going to cut £12 billion from the welfare budget. So this problem is obviously going to get a lot worse. Responding to but no, don't worry, the rich are getting another 5% off their tax. Responding to the findings, Campbell Robb, the chief executive of Shelter, said that this research paints a grim picture of youth homelessness in the UK and demonstrates that the government's current plan to cut housing benefit for 18 to 21-year-olds could be nothing short of catastrophic, as it's this which helps to pay for the hostel beds that keep young people off the streets. Well, they know full well what the consequences of cutting housing benefit are going to be, and it's more homelessness, obviously. If the government really wants to help young people, its first priority should be to invest in the safe, secure and genuinely affordable homes that are so desperately needed, rather than stripping away the threadbare safety net they have at the moment. Well, how about finding out why they're homeless? How about doing that for a start? This comes amid warnings in recent weeks that Britain is heading for a housing crisis, with the numbers of households in temporary accommodation at almost 65,000, the highest since 2008, and yet they're still letting in thousands and thousands of immigrants from the European Union, or through the European Union, from Africa and all over the world. Makes sense, does it? Community Secretary Greg Clark, speaking at the Local Government Association's annual conference on Friday, admitted that young people are being exiled from the places they come from to find a home that they can afford. In a statement, a government spokesman said, "Since 2010, we have increased spending to prevent homelessness, making over £500 million available to local authorities and the voluntary sector." Well, obviously it's not enough and it's not worked. So your statement means nothing, government spokesman, whoever you are. You're obviously too ashamed to put your name to this bogus statement. Other initiatives to help young homeless people include £14 million to support 10,000 vulnerable individuals in privately rented homes, £15 million to turn around the lives of 1,600 vulnerable homeless, and £40 million shared among projects to support young people to work and study and hostel accommodation to get them off sleeping on the streets. Mo Ibrahim, 22, from London, came to Britain 5 years ago and in 2013 was thrown out of the family home. How did he get in? He's, where's he from? "I used to sleep at the back of my mum's house in a park on a bench, and it was really horrible. I was lucky that it was summer. I would go to the shelter to have something to eat. When I used to sleep over there, I'd worry that someone would do something to me, I guess that's supposed to say. After 2 weeks of sleeping rough, Mo managed to get a place at Centrepoint. Everything changed when I went to the hostel. I started working and they would do anything they can to help you. When I started working, I was talking to my mum again. She was asking how did I get a job, and she was surprised about it. But now she knows that I'm here and I'm safe, and I get on with her very well. Oh, isn't that nice? But never mind, young people. You've decided that weed should be legal more than tobacco. This new study finds, this is July 6th in the Independent, a new study has found that people think tobacco is more harmful than marijuana, and most think the latter should be legalised. Well, I tend to agree that tobacco is more harmful than marijuana, if it's real marijuana. The survey of 1,000 people found that over half of young people think cannabis should be legal, whilst 50.9% think that tobacco should be illegal. This comes as more research into the medical properties of cannabis is undertaken, and several states in the US experience an economic boost from legalising the drug with little to no adverse effects on crime. The study was conducted by student Money Saver from its Facebook followers, not the most solid methodology, so this should be taken with a pinch of salt, and is perhaps more reflective of the student mindset than the country as a whole. Other key findings the survey produced. 25% of people under 30 believe alcohol should be illegal. Less than half of people think tobacco should be legal. More people thought cannabis should be legal than tobacco. 51% of people between 18 and 30 know someone with an alcohol problem. 45.8% of students agree or strongly agree that there is a drug culture at their university. Who created that? Over half of young people think that cannabis should be legal. Young people buying drugs from dealers do not feel safe whilst doing so. Surprise, surprise. 90% of respondents have had a blackout due to drugs or alcohol within the last year. But as I said at the start of that, yeah, tobacco is certainly more harmful than marijuana, but only if marijuana is genuine. You know, if it's organic, proper marijuana. But that ain't going to happen with all this legalisation. The reason, in my opinion, that it's been legalised is so that Big Agra can get hold of it, because they know there's a vast market out there for it. And they ain't going to let that go without making a profit on it, are they? And I guarantee you, it'll be genetically modified. So it ain't going to be real marijuana, is it? Huh? Maybe they'll do this in Europe, eh? This is an article back in March 2014, and this comes from the official European Parliament news site. MEPs reject draft seed regulation. Now, they tried to push this through, as I say, March last year, and I'm sure they'll come back and do it again, and it'll eventually get passed, as everything in Europe eventually does. The European Commission's proposal for plant reproductive material law, also known as the seed regulation, was voted down by Parliament on Tuesday amid concerns that it would give the Commission too much power and leave EU countries without any leeway to tailor the new rules to their needs. Following the Commission's refusal to withdraw its draft text and table an improved one, Parliament closed the first reading. The Commission's draft text was rejected by 650 votes to 15. Now, nobody read it and just thought, oh, well, this isn't going anywhere, so we'll just reject this one and we'll bring back a better one later, I guess. But this European Commission has never been elected by anybody in Europe. Not one single person voted for it. It was voted in by the cronies at the European Parliament. Or they were appointed, actually. They weren't even voted for. They were appointed by somebody, somewhere. And the first time they set up the European Commission, actually, I think 15 out of the 24, I think it was at the time, or it may even only been 20, but 15 or so of them were ex-communist party members. And nothing's changed, really, because that's what it is. It's the European Soviet Union. That's all it is. And it's coming to America, and Canada, and Mexico, and eventually the whole of the Americas. So, I mean, I talked about Greece earlier. Look at the mess that Europe's in. Look at the mess that Europe's in, and ask yourself, Americans, is that what you want? A single currency, and banks just, and the IMF just threatening you? Because that's what's coming. Today's vote shows the depth of Parliament's dissatisfaction with the Commission's proposal, which failed to meet its core objectives, such as simplifying the rules and promoting innovation. There you go, promoting innovation. So they can regulate seeds to promote innovation. Innovation in what? Other seeds? It also prompted many concerns amongst MEPs, for instance, about merging 12 directives into a single directly applicable regulation with no leeway for member states to tailor new rules to their needs, said Agriculture Committee Chair Paolo Di Castro. As MEPs, that's members of the European Parliament, by the way, for Americans, who co-legislate with the Council, we want to take our full responsibility for this legislation. For this reason, we cannot decide in a hasty manner on this proposal, which is crucial for many growers' associations, companies and citizens. Companies, eh? The high number of delegated acts would give Commission excessively wide powers over certain issues in areas which, due to the sensitivity, should be defined in the legal text, explained Rapporteur Sergio Paolo Francesco Silvestris. We therefore regret that the Commission has declined to withdraw this widely disputed text and come up with a better one. It is clear that the draft new rules must be redesigned to better respect different situations in different member states and bring about real improvements for all producers, consumers and the environment. We hope member states will be strong enough to follow Parliament's position and reject this unsatisfactory proposal, added Mr Di Castro. But again, all they're saying is that it's not a good enough draft. So come back with a better one and we'll pass it. But I'm going to read another article on this in a minute, which came out at the same time in the official mainstream media. But ending on this one, the next steps. Since the Commission refused to withdraw its proposal after Parliament rejected it, MEPs finalised the first reading and sent a position to the Council. If the Council supports Parliament's rejection, then the legislative process will end. Alternatively, the Council could amend the original Commission's proposal. If it does so, then Parliament could either reject the Council's amendments at the second reading and thus kill the legislative proposal for good, or it could start negotiations with the Council on the final wording of the new seed legislation. So they're telling you they're going to do it. They're going to do it, and this is to regulate what seeds you can buy in the store, and you can't even sell amongst yourselves unless these seeds are authorised by the European Union. But this was in the Express at the same time as this vote took place. Now heirloom seeds are under threat from EU regulations. Hard on the heels of the Royal Horticultural Society concerns over European Union rules on importing non-native plants, come fears that it could soon be illegal to even share old varieties of British seeds with friends. This is how ridiculous it is. A non-native plant to the UK is a potato. You know? Corn. So you wouldn't be allowed to import them, by definition, because they're not traditional plants in Britain. While the demand for heirloom seeds has nearly doubled in recent years, the Organic Gardening Catalogue's managing director has warned that proposed EU plant reproductive materials regulation could make it too expensive for companies to register seeds. Michael Hedges claims this would therefore make it against EU law to even share home-saved seeds with friends. Illegal. And Mr Hedges says the proposed European rules would threaten the existence of many historic and favourite garden seed varieties. In many cases, it would not be economic to register them, making it illegal to sell them or even share home-saved seeds with friends, he says. Biodiversity will suffer as a result, and the European seed market would be controlled by a handful of large seed companies. I wonder who they'll be, eh? He adds, this regulation is ill-conceived and needs to be resisted. Demand for heirloom seeds has been increasing since the grow-your-own boom because gardeners are searching for vegetables with more flavour than mass-produced supermarket varieties, or genetically modified ones, yeah. Record numbers and full of pesticides. Record numbers are growing their own tomatoes, for example, some choosing varieties that originate from before World War I. The Organic Gardening Catalogue, which has been supplying seeds to organic gardeners for 50 years, records that sales of tomato seeds were up 40% in the 2013 season. Some of the most popular tomato varieties driving demand include the Harbinger, introduced in 1910, the Golden Sunrise, which dates back to 1896, and the Elsa Craig from 1925. Tomatoes remain the most widely grown crop for homegrowers in the UK, and there's been a definite trend towards finding a better taste, says Mr Hedges. We're seeing it, Mr Hedges, what a funny name for that guy. We're seeing an increase in interest in old varieties, ideally suited to home garden growing and typically characterised by thinner skins, rich flavour and a long harvest and ripening period. It would be hard to find anything like these in the supermarket. Mr Hedges also says that the increased demand for these older varieties of British seeds has been driven by fears over future restrictions introduced by EU rules. So see, they're going to get around it because all these people have bought these seeds to grow their own tomatoes or whatever crop they want to grow, and then it's going to be illegal for them to even give the seeds to somebody else. They'll probably make it illegal for them to actually keep the seeds at all, because they'll make it illegal for you to plant these things in your garden. The proposed EU plant reproductive materials regulation threatens the existence of many historic and favourite garden seed varieties, he said. But as I said, it's going to be genetically modified, like the marijuana, I'm sure of it. But let's go back to 1999. GM food banned in Monsanto canteen. This is an independent in the UK. Monsanto, the biggest promoter of genetically modified food, was hoist with its own petard when it was discovered that its staff canteen in which GM produce is banned. Monsanto, the biggest promoter of genetically modified food, was hoist with its own petard when it was disclosed that it has a staff canteen in which GM produce is banned. Well, it's so important I have to say it twice. The firm running the canteen at Monsanto's pharmaceuticals factory at High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire, serves only GM-free meals. See, Monsanto's pharmaceuticals factory. What's that got to do with food? Pharmaceuticals are drugs. Friends of the Earth in a notice in the canteen, Sutcliffe Catering, owned by the Granada Group, said it had taken the decision to remove, as far as practical, GM soya and maize from all food products served in a restaurant. As far as practicable, it's virtually impossible. We've taken the above steps to ensure that you, the customer, can feel confident in the food we serve. Monsanto confirmed the position. Yes, this is the case, and it's because we believe in choice. Said the company's spokesman Tony Coombs. But employees at Monsanto's agribusiness plant at Cambridge were happy to eat GM produce, he said. The notice in the restaurant there says some products may contain GMOs, genetically modified organisms, because our staff are happy to eat food sprayed with fewer chemicals. Well, that's a lie for a start, isn't it? They're sprayed with more and more chemicals because they get resistant to them. The bugs do. Monsanto says crops engineered to be tolerant of its own weed killers need less pesticide, but critics say that though the dosage may be less, the impact on the environment of these pesticides is much greater. Adrian Bebb, Friends of the Earth's food campaigner, said the public has made its concerns about GM ingredients very clear. Now it appears that even Monsanto's own catering firm has no confidence in this new technology. And I read out a few weeks ago about last week, France banned the selling of Roundup, weed killer pesticide, because it was carcinogenic. But jumping forward, June 2013, GM foods kept off the menu at Westminster. Now remember, Monsanto believes in choice, but obviously the British government doesn't. The House of Commons is continuing to bar genetically modified food from its restaurants and cafes, despite a drive by ministers for the technology to be more widely accepted by the plebs. Well, it's on the shelves in Britain already, but they won't admit it, and nothing's labelled, so people don't know they're eating genetically modified food in Britain, or they believe they're not, actually. Owen Paterson, the Environment Secretary, this week launched a British move to try to persuade the European Union to relax restrictions on the cultivation of GM crops and allay public fears over so-called frankenfoods. Advocates of GM crops say they increase yields and produce more foods. Well, that's been proven wrong as well. Critics say that technology remains unproven and could threaten human health and the ecosystem, which it does. In a controversial intervention this week, Mr Patterson suggested people thwarting GM cultivation are putting lives at risk. Whose? Well, as I tell you, Mr Patterson, you're not that Minister for the Environment anymore, but how about you and your cronies who believe in GM food so much, experiment with it in Parliament for 10 years and see how many you die of cancer and become obese and have all sorts of illnesses. How about you do the experiment if you're so confident about it, and then the public can decide if they want it or not. Choice, democracy. The House of Commons Catering Service avoids, wherever identifiable, the procurement of foods that contain genetically modified organisms, the service said. However, the Commons insisted that banning GM, which was put in place in 1998, was not about health fears but simply reflected customer choice. That word again, choice. To this end, as part of the tendering process, food suppliers are required to work to a strict GM organisms policy and give assurances that goods supplied be free from genetically modified materials. It added, the decision to avoid GMs is seen as largely a matter of customer choice. Well, if it's a matter of choice, why aren't there GM products in the cafeteria? And then, surely politicians can decide whether they want to eat them or not. And see what happens. Give them the choice. The Commons' resistance to GM foods has come to light a day after Downing Street refused to say if the Prime Minister and his family would happily consume food including GM ingredients. Mr Patterson today acknowledged that his argument for more use of GM technology faces stiff resistance because of deep public scepticism. He wants EU regulators, that's because they're a pack of liars. He wants EU regulators to approve a long list of new GM crops, including herbicide-tolerant maize and sugar beet. Current rules mean that only when other European nations accept the case for GM will it be possible for Britain to use the crops more widely, he told the Conservative Home website. Well, that's why they're trying to change the rules with the seeds, so you can opt in or out all this stuff, and the public won't know anything about it. He said, I have to work closely the whole time with various allies, but it's a typical issue where there are terribly strong feelings in some member states. The last poll I saw in Germany, 98% of people were opposed to GM, so you have to really respect that. Yeah, it's about time you started respecting people's opinions, isn't it? But you won't. Mr Partner's outspoken argument for GM technology has angered some campaigners and worried politicians who agree with him but fear his combative approach will be counterproductive, like GM seeds, I guess. Lady Parmenter, the Lib Dem spokeswoman for Food, the Environment and Rural Affairs in the House of Lords, says Mr Patterson runs the risk of being seen as cheerleading for the GM industry. Well, he is. What do you mean he'll be seen as? He is. I wonder who's lacing his back pocket with brown envelopes. And this is from Florida, actually, and this is from one of the alternative media sites, but I'm going to follow up with one from the mainstream. The Free Thought Project, it was .com. In the past several weeks, a number of controversial natural health doctors have died under mysterious circumstances. Some of them have even had their recent encounters with federal agents and bureaucracies. 2 weeks ago, the string of mysterious deaths began when Dr. Jeff Bradstreet, MD, was found in a river with a gunshot wound to his chest. The police claimed that the gunshot wound was self-inflicted and that the death was a suicide. However, Bradstreet's family suspects foul play. Well, you know, why would he shoot himself in the chest? For a start. Last week, members of the family set up a donation page to find the answers to the many questions leading up to the death of Dr. Bradstreet, including an exhaustive investigation into the possibility of foul play. In just 1 week, the page has already managed to raise $25,000, many of those donations coming from former patients who were helped by Dr. Bradstreet's controversial treatments. Another death came on Father's Day, June 21st, when Dr. Bruce Hedendal, DC PhD of the Miami area, was found dead in his car with no explanation as to how it happened. As of right now, there are even fewer details about the circumstances surrounding Hedendal's death as there are about the death of Bradstreet. To make matters even more suspicious, both doctors have had run-ins with feds due to their unconventional treatments, which had been known to help people. In fact, just weeks before his death, Bradstreet's office was raided by the FDA. Nothing suspicious there, is there? Eh? He's found by a river with a gunshot wound to his chest, but nothing suspicious. And he was raided by the FDA. But this is the Mail Online, talking about the same case, on June the 29th. Family cries foul over suicide, they've got that in inverted commas, of anti-vaccination doctor Jeff Bradstreet and raised $20,000 to fund private investigation. Dr. Jeff Bradstreet was found dead in an apparent suicide in North Carolina on June the 19th. Days after FDA agents searched his office. He died of what seemed to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest. He was found in the Rocky Broad River in Chimney Rock by a fisherman. His family are trying to launch an exhaustive investigation into the possibility of foul play, and have raised $20,000 on GoFundMe. It's incredible that a family has to go to a crowdfunding site to get the death of their spouse investigated by anybody. The police just don't want to know, do they? No mention of a suicide note here, no mention of why would you possibly commit suicide. So why have the police said it's suicide, just right off the bat? The family of a controversial anti-vaccine doctor, it's controversial being anti-vaccine, who was recently found dead in an apparent suicide, have appealed to the public to help them raise money in order to launch an exhaustive investigation into the possibility of foul play. The body of Dr. James Jeffrey Bradstreet, who ran a private practice in Georgia treating children with autism using unconventional and polarizing methods, was found by a fisherman in the Rocky Broad River in Chimney Rock, North Carolina on June 19th. He died on a gunshot to the chest, whatever that means. There was a handgun found nearby, and police say the death appeared to be self-inflicted. It was found nearby. What, did they throw it away after he shot himself? Eh? What do they mean by nearby? Surely it'd still be in his hand. or, very close to his body. But Bradstreet's family and supporters are crying foul and believe there is much more to the story, especially after it was revealed that agents from the US Food and Drug Administration searched his office for unknown reasons just days before he turned up dead. They didn't have a warrant again, I guess, or any reason for raiding his office. I guess they didn't find anybody, so just shot him anyway, maybe, allegedly, who knows. Jeff dedicated his life's work to finding answers, always pushing the envelope and never giving up, even at the risk of being perceived as controversial, wrote his niece, Callie Bradstreet Howell, on the GoFundMe website. Now, in this moment, we find ourselves in a position where we too are in search for answers and we intend on finding them. The GoFundMe page has raised over $20,000 as of Monday. Well, I think it's gone up to, the last article mentioned it was up to $25,000. Bradstreet's Wellness Centre in Beaufort used a mercury toxicity treatment, among others, as an attempt to cure autism. He believed the heavy metal was a leading factor in the development of childhood autism, and it was supposedly introduced into the body by vaccines. What do you mean, supposedly introduced? It's in the vaccines. It was introduced to the body through vaccines. And other methods, of course. He also publicised autism research based on the disputed claim vaccines cause autism. Well, nobody's actually said that vaccines cause autism. This is obviously a reference to Andrew Wakefield, who never said that vaccines cause autism. He said it needed further investigation. The medical community says such claims have been disproved. Dr. Peter J. Hotez, Dean for the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine, told the Washington Post that this kind of mercury therapy is dangerous and without any benefit. The FDA has warned against such chelation therapies, saying they can cause life-threatening outcomes. What, like vaccines can't? That's why they've got a vaccine damage unit, or a vaccine damage court, in the US, and the British government has a vaccine damage payment scheme. I think the one in America has paid out $3 billion in vaccine damages so far. But that's not life-threatening, is it? Bradstreet's clinic was recently raided by agents from the FDA, who were receiving assistance from the Georgia Drugs and Narcotics Agency, the Gwinnett Daily Post reported. The FDA has yet to reveal why agents searched the office of the doctor, reportedly a former pastor who has been controversial for well over a decade, the newspaper reported. Bradstreet is from Braselton, Georgia. He went from being a pastor to attending the University of South Florida, where he received a medical degree and completed his residency at the Wolford Hall USAF Medical Center in Texas. His dedication to autism came after his son was diagnosed with the condition, so he knows a bit about it. Autism taught me more about medicine than medical school did, he once said in a conference the Epoch Times reported. While his family haven't explicitly said they believe he was murdered, his supporters have. Self-inflicted? In the chest? I'm not buying this, one person commented to Fox News. Infowars.com reported. It's funny they mention Infowars in the Daily Mail, This was a doctor who had access to pharmaceuticals of all kinds. This was a religious man with a thriving medical practice. Sorry, but this stinks of murder and cover-up. His body was sent to Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center for an autopsy on June the 23rd, and the case is still under investigation by the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office. Well, the family should wait and see what these sheriffs say before they spend $25,000 on a private investigation. The investigator from the Sheriff's Office, Jamie Keever, said, I've talked to some of those people today. I don't know what to say. They have a right to their opinion. Fiona O'Leary of Autistic Rights Together, ART, responded to Bradstreet's death and a call for an investigation into his death. She said, while it is very sad to hear of the death of Dr. Bradstreet in such tragic circumstances, it is important to consider his position as one of the world's leading practitioners in the field of biomedical treatments for autism. O'Leary continued, many of these so-called treatments are unlicensed and unproven to be of any benefit to autistic people. Indeed, many can have serious and dangerous side effects on an individual's health and well-being. Many supporters, that's in her opinion, many supporters of Dr. Bradstreet and the biomedical industry are hailing him as a hero, claiming foul play at the hands of the government, yet the truth is more simple perhaps. None of the many so-called treatments or cures could ever be substantiated and proven to be effective or beneficial outside of the biomedical's own propaganda machine. Exactly. It's the same as what's happened to Andrew Wakefield, and I guess he should watch out for himself, but I guess he's too high profile. I guess if he was found dead by the river or in his car for no reason whatsoever, there'd be a lot of people crying foul play. But I think there's another lady that actually died as well. I think there's been 3 doctors now in Florida over the past few weeks or months who have died, all involved in the same type of studies into vaccines. So I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that there's foul play involved, do you? I mean, one could be an accident, 2 is suspicious, and 3 is a pattern, I would suggest. But this is America again. Again, it's in the Daily Mail. If I can get this to load up on the iPad here. But Seattle's high school sparks outrage over policy which allows it to give IUD contraceptives to girls as young as 11 without seeking permission from their parents. Chief Sealth Health High School is one of 13 schools in Seattle to implement a statewide program which targets girls in 6th grade and up. Washington state law allows minors to seek birth control from doctors without asking their parents. 4 middle schools and 9 high schools in Seattle currently have in-school clinics where girls can go to seek contraception. At 11 years old, I wonder why. I wonder what kind of teachers are at that school. I was actually told by somebody in the UK that their daughter went to this school where they had these rules that they had to come to school with a skirt that was below their knees. And when she asked why, she was told that it was a distraction to the male teachers. What kind of teachers are they employing? You've got to wonder, haven't you? A public school in Washington state is offering taxpayer-funded intrauterine contraceptive devices to female students as young as 11 without seeking permission from their parents. The high school has sparked public outrage after implementing a statewide health policy which allows middle and high schools to administer birth control to girls in the 6th grade and up without informing their guardians. The high school is in fact one of 13 public schools in the area who have implemented the same controversial policy in an attempt to encourage young girls to be more proactive about contraception. No, they're more proactive in engaging in sexual activity. That's what they're encouraging them to do. At least 12 others are following the state law, which states that minors of any age studying at middle and high school can obtain birth control services without a parent's consent. What kind of people pass these laws, do you wonder? Have a vested interest in passing these laws, do you think? At the very least, you would wonder if they've got financial interest in passing these laws. Are they getting backhanders from the companies that make these products? Or are they in fact paedophiles who want these people to be on contraceptives so they don't get pregnant when they're raped? Additionally, the school are offering girls a chance to get a free IUD, a form of long-lasting birth control which is inserted into the uterus, and other long-acting reversible contraceptives, LARCs, at clinics located elsewhere if the school itself is unable to offer the service. IUDs are thought to be 98% effective against pregnancy. However, they do not offer any protection against sexually transmitted infections, and I'll add, they cause sterility and infertility in women. So they're going for it, aren't they? Amazingly, middle and high school students in Seattle can't get things like a soda or a bar of chocolate, which are banned in schools due to health reasons, while securing contraception is readily available to any girl willing to ask for it. On the Washington State Medicaid website, it states that there are health centres at 4 middle schools and 9 high schools in Seattle who now take part in a contraception-focused initiative called Take Charge, which has been in effect for a number of years now. Chief Sealth School actually began offering these devices in 2010, and they're only talking about it now. They've been doing it for 5 years. Earlier this week, CNN News reported that a spokesperson for the Washington State Healthcare Authority Take Charge program, which is targeted at girls and women of all ages who do not have health insurance, said that underage students are eligible for a full array of covered family planning services at school-based clinics if their parents meet the program's requirements. But the parents aren't involved here, so what does it matter? The spokesperson also noted that a student who does not want their parents to know they are seeking reproductive health services is allowed to apply for Take Charge using their own income, and if they are insured under their parents' plan, the insurance would not be billed. When asked by CNN, why not? There's obviously a lot more to this than just not letting the parents know, isn't there? They're not even charging insurance companies. When asked by CNS News if a 6th grader could get an IUD implanted without parental consent, the spokesperson responded, "We encourage all Take Charge providers to offer long-acting reversible contraceptives in their clinics." Well, sterility isn't non-reversible. A young person does not need parental consent to obtain an LARC or any other contraceptive method. If the young person is not choosing abstinence, she would be able to select a LARC and have it inserted without parental consent. So there you have it. Paedophiles running your schools now. Which, of course, they were before. But now they're just coming right out in the opening and telling you that your 11-year-old is likely to be involved in sexual activity, and you ain't going to know about it. You ain't going to be told about it. You ain't going to be told she's on contraceptives. But don't worry, you won't be billed for it. So it probably won't worry you in the slightest. Parents should be down at their schools demanding what is going on behind those doors, and dragging their children out, screaming and kicking if they have to, and just getting out of the system. That's it for tonight. Thanks for listening, and back on Thursday. Cheers.
No lizards, no aliens, no nonsense. This is Reality Bytes.